welcome to episode 30 of the Employer Content Marketing Pod. I set up the podcast just over a year ago, so reaching 30 is fantastic, and I've really enjoyed doing those episodes. And I've got well over 20,000 listens already for my little podcast. I'm super chuffed about that, and it's great. I'm really thankful of the listeners who have been involved, and also in particularly the guests that have been involved in the chat for the Employer Content Marketing Pod. So for episode 30, I'm chatting with Stephen Brand again. Stephen Brand works in talent attraction at HSBC, and we talk about talent communities. And we really think that talent communities can become your key marketing channel, just so long as you're doing more than just providing them job alerts, which typically lots of talent communities or talent pools provide. After all, people who are prepared to sign up to hear from you, deserve to be nurtured with content that already exists, but also content that can be specifically produced and also curated for them. We've actually split this episode into two. So episode 31 will be about who's doing talent communities well. Let's get on with the chat. Hi Stephen, how's it going?
All good, thank you, Chris. You?
Yeah, good, thanks. Happy Friday. So not that it feels like Friday. You said it hasn't felt like Friday for how long?
Probably just over a year. I think the last proper Friday I can remember feeling was when I woke up after the Rads in the end of January 2020 with a massive headache. That's the last proper Friday I remember feeling. Everything else has been basically a blur.
That's definitely a Friday feeling, for sure. Goodness me. Yeah, good stuff. So yeah, thanks for getting involved in this episode. You've been, for a good few months now, been noticing loads of perlers on your LinkedIn account. Been dropping into my feed about your views on the industry and tactics and strategy. So, I really wanted to kind of pick on some of those pearls with you today. And there's one in particular that you talked about was about talent community. So we'll talk about talent communities today, but before we get onto that, let's just do a little bit of an intro for those people who don't know you.
Okay, and I imagine that's 95% of your audience. So I am, yes, my name's Stephen Brand. So I've worked in and around recruitment marketing, employer brand for 20 years, something like that must be. Range of different roles. So I've worked creative agency side. So I've worked for TMP. I've worked for what is now Radency, Bartlett Merton all the way back in the day. Few in-house roles. So I've worked at EY and at Deloitte, currently on an engagement at HSBC. And I've also kind of filled in the middle. So I did a couple of years at one of the big RPO organizations, the Randstad Sourceright, running their in-house employer brand function for clients. So kind of over time focused more and more, first accidentally and then definitely the last few years on purpose on sort of employer brand and that as an area of real interest. And tragically I'm old enough to remember an entirely different industry to the one I work in today, which is, I think, part of the reason we probably still work in it, because it's basically, entirely different from what it was 5 years and 10 years ago. But when I start talking about how big Society Guardian used to be, it ages me rather. So I'll try and avoid doing that. But yeah, that's me.
It's phenomenal to see how much has happened, in the space of our careers, which is I suppose just about the same length of time, yes, just particularly the last decade, and it's
Exactly.
great. You've got such a cracking mix of experiences there, both client side, agency side, say RPO side as well. So yeah, I think it's going to be some great chat around talent communities. Now, you posted something, it was probably a couple of months ago, about talent community. They can be called various things. You could argue they're called different things because maybe there's slightly different things, talent pools, talent communities. Let's get your view on kind of what was the kind of gist of that post, and what's your view about talent communities and what they should be.
So I think so for a little while now, I've sort of had this belief, I guess, that to a large degree, organizations already have connections, already have links, already have a relationship with the vast majority of people they would ever want to hire through one of two streams. So the first stream is the extended professional networks of people that already work for you, and how you sort of leverage those, and that's obviously one strand of employer brand strategy and tactics there. But the second is individuals who have historically had some kind of an engagement with you. So they might have applied, they might have made it a certain way through your recruitment process, that needs to be regretted. They may have worked for you briefly and then left. They may have just attended an event. But you've kind of, various bits of your organization has been sort of hoovering up contact information, CV information for quite some years. And it I guess historically it's tended to sit in systems that were designed really just to have a record that it happened, and to support that person through the process they were going through, rather than to think, who are these people beyond the process that they're currently going through? Who are they? What are they looking for? Where might they, where's their career going? Those kind of conversations. So you would tend to have effectively things that I guess would have been called talent pools, but to a large extent were stagnant and dead and had green moss floating over them, because there's no real interest in them. But I think really the opportunity then exists to say, we might have 10,000, 100,000 names in these databases. What can we do to bring them back to life? What can we do to think within those databases there are pockets of people, individuals who would be a great fit for our organization. Either they were at the time, but the right role wasn't available, or they were lacking a certain bit of experience that they now have, or they've learned a new skill, or whatever it might be. There's probably a huge range of reasons, but there'll be people that we have already met, that we already know, that have engaged with us, that we can reconnect with, that we can rekindle a relationship with, and try and understand a little bit more about where they're at, with a view that maybe next time is the right time for them, and we can bring them into the organization without, I guess, the need to go back out and effectively re-find them. So I think that what you end up doing, because there's a big grey Excel spreadsheet somewhere that just has names in it, it probably looks a lot less frightening just to think, do you know what, I've got a new role, I'm just going to advertise it. And so then you end up effectively refinding and rekindling and restarting that relationship. And you do it, you sort of go out and you market and you source and you do all your activities, and all of those things carry a cost. And what you're doing effectively is just bringing in that same name and adding it again into your spreadsheet, except your spreadsheet will probably go, this guy's already here, he she applied 5 years ago. And so you're effectively just refinding talent you already had. So again, if we're thinking about companies that really want to focus on speed of action and efficiencies and driving budgets and those kind of things, then there's a business logic to saying it's worth exploring these databases we have, to see how we can bring them to life, how we can resuscitate them, because there's potential talent in there already that we know. And then beyond that, if we're thinking about as employer brand professionals, as communication professionals, this is a really rich sea of activity for us to get involved in, because it speaks to exactly what we're all about, what we're focused on. So yeah, so I guess there's the two parts to it. So there's the business imperative that would say, right, as a this is a business service we can provide, so we can look at this database and we can help the business understand sort of who's in there, and if there is any opportunity, if we do begin to reach out again to some of those contacts that we have, would they re-engage with us? And sort of we can bring the pool to life that way, which gives us the potential to begin to recruit a bit more quickly, reach people a bit more speedily, that sort of thing. But equally, they're a great audience for a lot of the contacts and communications that we're interested in sharing. Again, it's an audience we already have access to, and that we can help run on behalf of the organization. So again, I don't think it's necessarily about saying, right, recruiters, this is now another thing I have to ask you to do on top of interview scheduling and all that. More, look, this is a thing that we can do, that your employer brand function, your comms function, wherever you sit, we can do to support you. But we think there's real value there. We think it's an untapped opportunity for the organization that probably doesn't carry a great cost to explore. So again, if we're a little bit concerned about massive investments without proof, then something like this, I think, doesn't necessarily have to carry very significant upfront costs. If a lot of what you do is kind of looking for ways to use content you're already developing for use externally, then you can. This is another audience. Now you need to take it further than that, but I think to start with, I think it's absolutely fine to say we have content we produce for our social channels, for example. Let's consider this to be an internal social channel. Our sort of this community is an internal social channel. Let's run and share content there and try and understand, who would engage. Are people prepared to talk to us again? Can we rekindle that relationship? Because if there's, I don't know, if there's 10,000 people in there and 2% do, then that's still a couple of hundred of decent connections that you don't then necessarily have to go and find. And if you place 5% of them, eventually all of these sort of little things can start to make real differences to the way the business performs and how quickly they can hire, and the experience that those individuals have with the organization. So I think, from a sort of talent community and from this idea of sustainable employer brand, so the idea that you can try and get yourself to a position where your reliance isn't constantly on external avenues to deliver what you need. So, by that I mean, you don't always, you're not always looking to go to agencies to create your content for you, because you kind of work with people internally, and you've got mechanisms and processes that help you do that internally and tell your stories to a degree yourself. But equally, you don't always look to job boards, to Indeed, to social channels to drive applications in, because you're networking, you're using connections and things that you already have. So wherever possible, you're being as sustainable as possible, because the business is going to love you if you can turn around and go, I don't need to advertise so much next year because we've got these great internal connection points. We've got our existing employees, and they're getting really smart and nuanced around sharing our content and opportunities with their networks. And we've got this talent pool, this community that is 5,000 people. We're getting some good engagement. So actually, I don't need to market externally so much. What I want to do is I want to do a layer right at the top of awareness. Then I'll use some social channels for, because I want to sort of bring fresh blood all the time, of course, into that community. But I don't need to do role specific marketing so much. I don't need to, that's not my external isn't my first port of call for every requisition I open. I've got this that I can go to. And every once in a while, there'll be one that I can't fulfill, and that's absolutely fine. And then maybe I'll be knocking for some marketing budget, but it's not my first call. And I think once you can start to position it in those terms, then I would think any CFO, any CEO is going to be interested in having that conversation with you, because there's a real lasting value to it, which I think that long-term value is where I think we can really demonstrate an impact for the business.
Yeah, in an ideal world, it should really. well, an ideal but also entirely possible world, it should be your first media channel that you go to
Yeah, I think so.
is your talent pool, your talent community.
Yeah, I mean,
Because as
how?
you said, you've already invested in getting those people. So you'd be literally be throwing your money away to reach those same people again because you've already got.
Yeah, exactly. And I guess, like, and I understand we don't live in an ideal world, and a lot of what we have to do is restricted by budget and time pressures, particularly. But we do live more and more in a world where, as a consumer, we expect in organisations we've interacted with to remember that fact, and not to treat me as if they've never seen me before when I go back next time. And so I think increasingly as an employer, it will jar with candidates. It will seem unusual for candidates to think, hang on, I applied to you 2 years ago. Why is this like a first introduction? Why is this like a first date? It's like I've interviewed with you before, that kind of thing. I think was maybe it's still just about forgivable. It was forgivable 3 or 4 years ago. Probably in a year or two, I'm not sure that will really stand as far as the candidate experience goes. I think that's then people start to switch off straight away if it's like you don't, it's like you've never met me. So I think it's something that's definitely worth looking at while there's the opportunity to be to really make a difference with it.
And it's the big thing of this is not having job vacancies, job alerts as being your first port of call or your standard go-to piece of content. If you're going to be reaching out to people in that talent pool and making more of a talent community, then there are more demands on the content that you're creating, aren't there? Otherwise, people will turn off.
Yeah,
or just
exactly.
Ignore you.
They'll hit unsubscribe because I mean the other, I think we have to be, and I've had to make my peace with this. You're unlikely to have talent in your community that's only in your community. Chances are they're signed up to others, just like they're applying to other people. So you have to find a way to cut through and be the one they don't want to unsubscribe from, be the mail they want to open. And yeah, you do place additional demands absolutely on the content. And I think that's probably one of the key reasons why you would say this is not a function that I should pass on to recruitment to deliver. This is a service I can offer my business internally. So I think about my role as sort of employer brand or recruitment marketing as having an internal face and an external face. And historically, the external face would be the better known, the one with the bigger budget, the one where you spent the most time. But I think increasingly you can do the most good with your internal face, which is to say, actually, what I can do for you, Mr. Head of Recruitment, with your 10,000 person Excel, is I think I can turn that into a 1,500 person live pool of people that we are, in conversations with, that we're sharing content with, that we can start to understand where they are in their career in an updated sense, what they're looking for, the topics we're talking about that they like, and therefore I can start to provide information on when roles come up. Who do we have that might be a good fit, that might be worth a conversation? And currently, at the moment, what you have is 10,000 dead names, and that's no good to you. So that's then a real value add internal service that you can be providing as an employer brand professional, and say that then my role, the budget that I'm given, I'm going to focus it more on what I can produce for those audiences, the content, the stories that I can tell for those audiences, and less on chucking a load of money at the big job boards and buying up all my LinkedIn job slots and Facebook advert and all of that sort of stuff. I will not ask for more money, but I will redirect, so you will see less of the brand externally, and you need to be comfortable with that. But I think I also like it because they're kind of an audience. We talk about them as audience, and eventually we would like to potentially get round to offering them a role in the organization. I guess that the transaction is always built around that. Their initial interest is built around a role, probably, and eventually will be one of our key KPIs will be how many people come out of that community and into a role. But also, if you've got 1,500 people, 2,000 people, 5,000 people that are interested in what you're talking to them about with regard to your organization, then you've got the opportunity to, do your creative testing with them, do some of your market research with them. And that's, again, a benefit to the organization in terms of having an engaged audience ready to talk to, but it also becomes a sort of a participation thing. So again, what you don't want to get to, because it's only one step on from the job alerts, is that you're a broadcast channel where every 2 weeks, because that's what you've set the system up to do, it vomits out an article or something into an inbox. Actually, the opportunity to invite that involvement, that reciprocation. So it might be surveys, it might, there are polls, there are various things you can do to invite that participation, which again is, from my point of view, I'm thinking, I want candidates to feel like they're a part of something and are contributing to something. I think that's got to feel pretty good, rather than just having a shit job vomited at them once a month. But equally for the business, if the business is saying, we've got a product in development, or we're thinking about moving to something app based, then I can say, well, in the talent community, we've got 500 people in that age bracket. Why don't we find a way to ask them? And rather than always having to go. So again, it's about, what do we already have? What do we already have access to before we go out and engage that market research company to build us this panel? What if we already had the panel and we could put it together ourselves? Then should we think of that first? Because that also says to that audience, we know your sort of, we bring you a bit closer to the company and our development roadmap, or where we're thinking about going. We're interested in, we value your opinion. So again, to your point about it shouldn't just be job alerts, all of our conversations shouldn't be about careers. They should be about other things the organization is looking at and doing. If we're sort of selling people on a whole vision, then yes, we want to talk about career opportunities, but also what else is the organization doing? How is it future-proofing itself? How is it developing and growing? And every time you do that, then I think you just help clarify some of that picture in the individual's mind about the kind of place that would be to work, with the view that, when eventually the right role comes up and you knock on their door and go, I'm sorry, this time it is a job alert, they're more likely to do something about it, because it hasn't just been that, it's been all of this other stuff that helps them really put together a picture of what a professional and a personal life would be like at the organization. So I think it's not easy to do, because I think if it was, everybody would do it, but I do think it offers a much greater return than the probable outlay.
And the business case is there as well, isn't it? It's something you can pitch to the powers that be, the budget holders, that are basically going, we already have these people. We're going to be basically maximising the investment we've already put into this talent pool, talent community, to get them there in the first place, before we go elsewhere. It's definitely, I think it's definitely a goer. I think one of bringing it back to this podcast, and this podcast is about looking at employer marketing through a content marketing lens, and ultimately, this is about talent communities, about treating your talent community as a content marketer. Now, what the hell does that mean? That basically means, if we're saying that your talent community is your kind of should be your primary media channel, if it is your media channel, then you actually treat your audience, those members of that channel, as your readership, as your subscribers. Those people, literally your audience, who are craving certain types of content, and that content wouldn't always be job vacancies. So I think talent communities definitely are a massive opportunity, to kind of say, okay, from a marketing perspective, let's treat it like a media channel, and let's think about who our listeners are, who our readership is, who our viewers are. And I think when you think about that, your content changes. But I suppose, if we go, right, well, talk about content marketing, media channels, blah blah blah, typical marketing speak. But actually, when it comes to actually getting it done, what can in your view, what can employers do to kind of turn the dial more towards treating a talent community in the way that we're talking about?
So I think there's probably I suspect that realistically, sort of a lot of organizations are already doing this kind of marketing. You'll know from talking to others on this podcast, there's employer marketing, content marketing as a function of recruitment marketing is more and more established, but it just tends to be considered looking at external channels. And I think all this really is, in my head, really is just a different channel. The difference probably is that it's a channel one step closer to you, because they're not, when we put content out onto, and we target through Facebook or through LinkedIn or even through the job boards, they're surrounded by other employers shouting other things at them. And the opportunity we have in this sort of more gated community is that it's just us. They're already one step closer. So again, the bit around market research and things is to treat them really as an informal extension of your organization, not as somebody we found sort of through social, but who is effectively at this point a stranger. I just want to shout some good stuff at you. More, we already know you. You're kind of a bit closer. In this environment, we can have a bit of a more personal conversation. So it changes the dynamic a little. But I think the philosophy remains the same, which is you're thinking about who is the audience. So I think there's work you can do with if you have access to your databases, to look at what you can do to break that group of 10,000 up into smaller chunks by geography or role family or however you want to do it, and then begin to share with them content that you believe will be relevant and interesting, in the same way as you would plan and map out your content for external audiences. So I think you can repurpose and reuse a lot of the content that already exists. By no means is this about creating an entirely new suite of content for this audience. It's, again, to start with, it will be about this audience is currently inert. What do I have that I can share and get into get into a consistent habit of sharing regularly content to see, can I bring parts of this to life? And some, the majority probably you may not be able to, because it will have been a sort of a non-relationship for so long. But the opportunity, I'm sure there would be names in there that people that have replied recently, or got to a latter stage, or really like the brand, or the timing is just right, and they do click and they do engage. And it's that sort of part that you can then start to cultivate and get to know and understand. But again, you can do it one step closer than with a social network, with an external media channel. So they're just a little bit closer. They're not surrounded by so much noise. So think about the marketing types, then we can get into some of the longer form content that I know, again, when we're out in the world and we're swimming on Facebook and Twitter and things, we're steered quite strongly away from anything in depth and long form, because people don't have the time to notice it or to dedicate to it. It has to be quick and it has to be sharp, and that's fine. But in this environment that we're talking about creating, we can explore some of the longer form content, I think, which again gives extra depth, extra value to those that are prepared to engage with it. So I think the philosophy remains exactly the same as if you were looking at developing a content, sort of your content plan for your external channels. You just have this other column that is your internal channel. And you have a content plan at the start of the year that says, these are the themes and pillars I want to talk about. This is the content I'm going to use. And then every 2 months, I look at who's engaging with what's landing well, and you iterate and you change and you sort of replan according to that. I think the only thing that we tend to think about with the talent community audience is that in time, and it might be from day one, but it might be that you want to get to more of a proof of concept, and you're starting to see real sort of life beginning to be breathed into it. That you do think about what exclusive content do I have to offer in this environment? Because if I think that I've got people in this community, but probably they're also still on Facebook, they're also on social. So if I'm everything I serve on my external channels, I also just serve on this sort of semi-internal one, then there'll be overlap. So so I want to be clear that there's a value to being part of the community. So that's for you to stay in and not hit unsubscribe when I land something in your inbox. But equally, if one of my key drivers now for any external activity I do is to bring people not into a role requisition, but into that community as the key action, then I've got to offer something. I've got to offer a reason. I've got to offer some real value. So I want to be offering something that they can't find anywhere else. So that's where I think you do get to thinking about, right, I've got my content plan for my attraction efforts overall, and that includes all of my channels, my external and my internal. But then there's going to be this little element where for internals only, there's a little bit extra. And so that might be the stuff it might be the audio because it's a real deep exploration of a topic. It might be the market research thing because it brings you closer to the product roadmap of the organization. It might be an interview with the CEO that we choose not to share externally because it's just available for this community. But I think for a lot of people, the best experiences of being part of a group or a community or something is when it does give you that sense, that backstage pass, that sense that you're getting access to something that isn't available to anybody else. And that's a good reason not to unsubscribe, and hopefully a persuasive reason to subscribe in the first place. I think this sense that, with a rightly or wrong, whatever that decision is based on, it's this idea that you can get something that for me is valuable to me, and that I wouldn't be able to find anywhere else. I won't be able to find just if I hit follow the social channel. I won't get that. Whereas if I'm prepared to join the community, then what's in it for me is access and information and insight that, and the business might say it's going to be all about us because really we're focused on converting you eventually to an applicant. So we're going to focus on giving you access to our people and our products and things to really excite you about being here. But equally, you might say, actually, the value we want to give back is in sort of career or sort of information about and support in your career direction. It might be access to some of our training. It might be those kind of things that say, actually, do you know what? We're such good people. Obviously, but we're such good people. It's not about us, it's about you. So what can we give you? And we're a big organization. We have access to, LinkedIn courses. We have access to this. We can make that available to this community. And then being able to people joining because they can train themselves and then not apply. And that's going to be a difficult sell. But, we all understand that the experience that individual walks away from thinking, what an organization. All I had to do was sign up and, talk to them. I had access to this stuff and no pressure, no spammed inbox with roles and job descriptions, and that in terms of the relationship and the power and the connection to the brand, is massive. So then if you just put yourself in a position where if you do have the right role for these people, no matter how well embedded they are working somewhere else, you give yourself the best possible chance to convince them to join you because you've done so much to show them the organization, to show them your personality, your values, your in sort of living and breathing, not written on a wall, but we value your training and development. So even before you join us, look, you've got all that. So I think there's really interesting, different things that you could do in this space. That again, and it's. I know it's all philosophy until you actually get out there and do it, but that, just the dots all sort of align so you can make a real difference to the experience of people. And even if a load of them just don't join, but they say that is a talent community to be a part of, that's a community to be a part of. It's just, there's real value in that. and people start being referred into it, then again, that's doing its job every bit as much as, you know, the people you're able to place. So yeah, I think there's man, there's just, yeah, sorry, I ramble on about this stuff, but there's loads
No, it's good.
loads that
No,
can be done.
there's loads to unpack. I think for me, you know, when you were saying what you're saying, it's actually speak louder the words, don't they? It's yeah. If they, let's take, I reckon there's a few, let's say at least a handful of organisations in the world that have as one of their, you know, pillars, connect their, you know, EVP is constantly developing, you know, always learning, whatever. So if you were to have that, I'd much prefer to be creating content that is not just saying that through an ad, or, you know, someone looking fairly inspired, looking into the distance or something, you know, but actually tapping into an element of LinkedIn learning, for example, something that's going to, you know, help people in that talent community develop their, you know, it could be an article or discussion on Zoom about what is the role of emotional intelligence in leadership, especially in a remote working world. You know, so for me, it's just if that kind of content sits perfectly there, and if someone's asking, well, why are we doing that? Then the justification is, well, this is what we say, you know, say externally and also to our employees internally. Kind of use your pillars as editorial guidance, really, and then you move towards having this kind of content that is
Exactly.
just far different than job alert.
Yeah, exactly. And it means you don't have to do it all as well, which I think is the important thing. Is it's not a thing that has to sit with you as some lone geezer sitting in a corner, you know, going, right, well, I've taken this on, this database makes no sense, and now I've got to do all of the content generation and everything as well. Actually, if you're leaning, as you say, on maybe the sort of the pillars of the organization, key messaging areas, then a lot of this content and these comms is being created anyway for customers and other and stakeholders and other groups. So you're able to make use of that content that's already being created. Maybe you edit it, maybe you run as is, but it's there already, and it means that again your community is not and just an endless stream of job related stuff or careers related stuff. You can have in there a mix of stuff that's nothing to do with it at all, but there is an indication into the way the company thinks, the way the company acts, what the company believes, which is, you know, every bit as important. If you're asking people to change their jobs, it's not just what is the function of the job I will do, but it's what, you know, what is the company, where's the company going, what does it believe in, you know, how did it act in the last year, and is that the sort of place I want to work for? So those kind of things I think are massively important as part of the content plan. And it means that because it's not just focused on employer brand or jobs, you probably don't have to create it, because somebody better than you in marketing or communications whose function this just is has already done it. You just need to know who that person is. So your job again becomes just about joining the right people together and knowing who you can talk to in the organization to bring this stuff for you and being able to explain to them why you're doing what you're doing, and so having your business case about why it's good for the whole organization. But then say, all I need is stuff you already have. I'm not commissioning you to do more stuff. Just treat me as an avenue. When your new stuff's created, it would be great to see it, and then I can work out if it's something I can use. It's another audience for you. It's a weight off my back. It's kind of everybody wins. Because I think then
you can repurpose it as well, can't you? You know, it's, if you need to give it your own slight angle, then at least you've got, say, 80-90% of content there.
Yeah, exactly. If I think about,
you know, at very least top and tail it.
Yeah, so I was thinking about, because we spoke about, think about sort of examples where this is done well, and really sort of from a recruitment point of view, it's pretty challenging. But I did think about, if I think about something like Hung Lee's Brain Food.
Yeah.
So stuff like that is, to me, is kind of what we're kind of talking about, because it's really, you know, thoughtfully curated in the, to your point just then, not everything is really directly related to recruitment. Some of it's way left field, but maybe has an application. Some of it's just interesting in, you know, what's happening in the world and society. Others, you know, other bits are very focused. The content's very focused on a particular area within recruiting or employer brand. So there's a real mix to it that's thoughtfully put together based on over time, understanding what the audience is looking for, what the audience needs, what the audience responds to. So that's, is a really smart then way of delivering the kind of marketing we're talking about. And I think it also is kind of, if you think sort of long term, where can you get to? And particularly when it comes to some of the advocacy applications and things, the ability for members of that community to start to feel like they can contribute to it themselves. So if I think of this community that I'm a part of now as not being something where there are some recruiting overlords that are chucking me things to nibble on until they're ready to hook me out because they've got a job, and I think of it more as a community of peers where we share ideas and sort of content sort of drops in around these ideas and directions and where's the future, that sort of stuff. Then if I read something, maybe I bring it into this group and I can share in the group, and so the group then starts to again take its life to another level, and that's sort of where the brain fruit's clearly got to, is where a lot of the content is referred in by members of the community who think this will be interesting to my group of brain fooders. And if there's a way of getting to that kind of stage, then I think you've got something hugely powerful. And then when we talk about it being sustainable, well, if your community will go off and source the content for you, and then your role just becomes that sort of thoughtful editor-in-chief that says, right, how do I select the stuff that I think will really land with this community? Then, happy days. Obviously it takes a lot of work and effort, and there are simpler ways to do it, but just thinking about how these kind of things can work from relatively sort of humble beginnings, I imagine, to grow into something that really is a self-sustaining organism of real value to everybody that's a part of it, then it's clearly evidence that it can be done.
Absolutely. I think when you think about, if you're getting people to subscribe, and there's still a massive competition in inboxes, because people get so many emails. I think also then, if you're thinking about, well, we've got to move more towards tapping into mobile and looking at text and messaging, even that your mobile is kind of, if you get a WhatsApp message or a text message, that is more kind of personal VIP space. So therefore, whether you're trying to compete in the feed of an inbox or with other information on messages on a mobile phone, means that the content does actually have to do a lot more, work a lot harder by being something that does tap into what people crave and what they need, rather than just job vacancies. So I'd say that what people should do is not be afraid just to start simple, just going, let's focus on maybe one or two pieces of content that we know is going to be really, really interesting to the people that have signed up to us. And we add that to, a list of vacancies that we have at this particular month, because competition, even if someone has subscribed, is still extremely fierce.
Yeah, exactly. So I think, there are, you can have, it's absolutely right to have grand ambitions and aspirations for where you want to get to in terms of how interactive you want the community to become, how large you want it to become, how you vary up the content you deliver and frequency according to what different segments of that audience want. So sort of audio long form versus shorter articles versus video pieces. You can absolutely have a roadmap that says this is where I want to get to in however many years, but start simple, and start with something that not low-hanging fruit is a horrible way to describe it, but start with a pain point the business has, and start to look for a quick and simple way that you can help fix that using what you already have, and you will have. And I'm sure recruitment won't mind giving you a list of people and then some live roles, and then if you add the content you have created or know exists to that, then you can start to make some connections and just start to show this thing in action. And I think then pretty quickly it snowballs, both in terms of bringing the community to life itself, but also probably interest in the business. And then if you need, the ear of somebody, you need a bit of, you need a few hours support to really make sense of all of this stuff. You need somebody just to pull apart the Excel properly for you because it's not your thing. Then I think you can probably find that. But your solo bit is probably the business case, and then the little experiment that can kind of show it in action. And I think if you can do that, then then you can get to work on your sort of master plan for taking over the world, as it were.
Thanks for listening. And if you enjoyed what you heard, then please feel free to subscribe. And it would be awesome if you could leave a review as well. It really does help.